Thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Whether you're listening during your commute, while working out, or just relaxing at home, we appreciate you. Every download, every listen, and every subscription means a lot. Up next, the 12 Kyle podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. Man, check this out. On this episode, what I want to do is take a look back. As many of you know, or maybe you don't know, I am a proud alum, as well as former student athlete or athletic student at South Carolina State University. It's a historically black college located in the Garden City of Orangeburg in the state of South Carolina. And as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. There's a jersey, a couple of jerseys behind me, and a helmet over here, which is my actual helmet. As I mentioned, I played football at South Carolina State from 1991 to 1995. At the time of this recording, a week ago, I got a chance to watch my alma mater play for the Black College National Championship. And it was leading up to the game, a grand event. My school, South Carolina State, had earned the right to go to the Cricket Celebration Bowl to play against Jackson State. Jackson State was the winner of the Southwestern Athletic Conference, aka the SWAC, and South Carolina State had won the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, aka the MEAC. So, in essence, this was the Black College Super Bowl, and it was billed as such. Jackson State, I think, came into the contest 11-2, and South Carolina State came in at 9-2. So these teams were both nationally ranked among FCS schools, and so it was going to be a great game until it wasn't. My beloved alma mater fell to Jackson State 28-7, and let me be the first or the last to congratulate Jackson State on a great season and a huge victory over my Bulldogs. Well deserved. They earned it. They won it on the field that day, and they get the props, and they are the Black College National Champions. With that being said, I do want to offer just my thoughts and opinions on not just the game, but if you look at the title of the of this particular episode, it says "Almost." We almost had it. We almost were the national champions of Black college football. We almost were a team of destiny, a team that really came out of nowhere for a lot of people this particular season. And the reason why I say that is because, as many of you know, and probably a lot of you don't know, this is the first year under our new head coach, Coach Chennis Berry. Chennis Berry was hired last January, I should say, after completing 3 successful seasons at Benedict College, which is located in Columbia, South Carolina, just a good 30 miles up the road from South Carolina State University. Chennis Berry came in very high and very heralded, but the thing was that there were some haters who said, well, he's a Division II coach. How is he going to cope at South Carolina State University? And actually, people had their doubts. And I can't say why they should have had their doubts or shouldn't have their doubts. But when it came time for the media and the fellow coaches to vote as to how they think the season would play out, South Carolina State was voted to finish 4th. Keep in mind, there's only, 6 schools in the conference? So we predicted pretty much to finish almost dead last. And, nobody knew what to expect. And it's always difficult when you're, under a new regime because you just don't know what's going to happen. And as a proud alum, I was also very concerned because I didn't know much about Coach Berry. I knew that he was pretty good and he had a really good record at Benedict College. But I didn't know it, hadn't seen any of his teams play. And so I came into the season with an open mind saying, hey, if we can, recruit some kids, word on the street was that there were a lot of kids. There were at least, I think, 10 to 14 kids coming from Benedict, which in college football would be a step up because they're going from Division II to FCS. I was like, maybe we got a shot. Not a shot to win it all because I didn't think we could win it all, but I thought we, could be competitive. And ultimately, that's what you want. And from our first game, and I watched every game that we played. The first game was a struggle. Actually, we were ahead. We played one of our famed rivals, former MEAC rivals, Florida A&M University, and we lost. I think we were up by 10 with maybe 5 minutes to go, and we lost that game. I can't remember what the score was, but we lost the family, but it was a close game, and it gave me some optimism as to how the season might be. I never thought the season would be the way that it turned out, but we almost won it all. And so I watched every game this year. And one thing I realized was that we had a lot of speed. We had a quarterback, which was something we haven't had in some years. We had a very competent quarterback, a kid by the name of Eric Phoenix, one of the kids who did play under Coach Berry at one point, coming from Benedict. And so, that being said, we had some really good receivers, a good tight end, some really decent running backs. And on the defensive side of the ball, South Carolina State has always been known for their defense. So I wasn't, really overly concerned about the loss to Florida A&M. I just knew that we could play better, and we'd be in most of the games. Ultimately, that's what you wanted, because here's the thing: our previous regime and our previous coach, Coach Buddy Pugh, had been at South Carolina State for, I want to say, 21 years, and he had won several conference championships. He had won a Black College National Championship, I think, once or twice. But and he was at the time that he retired, he was the winningest coach in school's history, surpassing my head coach, Willie Jeffries. And so, anytime you have a change like that and you're replacing a legend, it's tough. And I do remember, even in the negotiations process, Coach Pugh actually said, "I want Coach Berry, to be my successor," because he knew what kind of man he was, he knew what kind of coach he was, and he knew what kind of enthusiasm he could bring to our fan base as well as the school. And so, shortly after Coach Berry accepted the position as head coach at South Carolina State University, we started seeing these um, reels on Instagram. We started seeing these Facebook posts. And what happened was they had a social media team. We didn't see a lot of social media stuff, I'll be honest, under Coach Buddy Pugh. Coach Pugh's a lot older. And, there might have been 10 videos the last season that he coached. And it wasn't really a successful season, so I get it. But we had won the national championship in 2021 when Coach Pugh's football team defeated Jackson State, who at the time were led by Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, in the Celebration Bowl. And so you fast forward to 2023 into 2024, you still don't know what the team is going to look like. And ultimately, the team really got better week in and week out. And we started to string together wins. And you started seeing more and more of these videos. Well, let me back up a little bit. Actually, during spring practice, as well as during leading up to the spring game, as well as throughout the summer, you see these videos of the players working out. You see videos of Coach Berry, and he has these quotes and everything, and he's very, very motivational, very very driven, and to me, on the surface, he looks like a guy that I know I could play for. And so it was, for me, the enthusiasm brought a lot into, I think, our program. And he believed in those kids, and ultimately the kids believed in him. And slowly but surely, we started stringing together wins. And I watched all of the games, but there were a couple of games that we probably in years past would have lost. but we found ways to win. And I think that's the mark of a good team. Ultimately, it came down to we played against one of our rivals, North Carolina Central, out of Durham. And that was the team that came into the game, the number one team in the conference. At the time, we were number two. And we beat them at home. I think we won by like 4 points. And it was on ESPN. Great game. And, we were excited because we knew after that, we had a pretty good chance of winning the conference because there was no other team that was going to stand in our way that was that talented to stop us. And so we get to the, I think it was the game against Morgan State University, and our quarterback Eric Phoenix, he hurt his ankle, and he didn't play anymore the rest of the game, and he actually sat out of the last game against Norfolk State. And he sat out that game because when we beat Morgan State, we then clinched a berth to the Celebration Bowl, and Phoenix didn't have to play in the last game, which is his senior year. So his final home game as a Bulldog. But nonetheless, we had an incredible year. Not only was Phoenix named the MVP, offensive MVP, I think the defensive MVP was on our team as well. Aaron Smith. We had conference players, guys who made all conference up and down on both sides of the ball. Our receivers led the conference in receptions. I think our first three receivers were the top three receivers in the conference. So accolades all across the board on the offensive, defensive line, linebackers. A very storybook season. We won our conference, and so we accepted the bid to the Celebration Bowl. And meanwhile, on the other side, in the SWAC conference, Jackson State is tearing it up. They're beating everybody. They're blowing teams out, and they won their conference. They were also undefeated in their conference, just like we were. In the SWAC, they play a few more conference games because the SWAC is a bigger conference as far as teams are concerned, a number of teams, and they won their conference title, and they accepted the bid to play in the Celebration Bowl. Now, what was interesting was there was a shift in college football, as many of you know, or maybe you don't know, where the college football playoff expanded. And this is in FBS. I think those are the initials in FBS. So it went from a 4 playoff team to a 12 playoff team. And what happened was they moved all of the bowl games up a week. And so because the Celebration Bowl is televised live on ABC, and is the only bowl game, because again, it's the Black College Super Bowl, it's the only game that's being played at that particular time. So it's not competing with any other games. They decided to, as the games moved up, they had to move up the Celebration Bowl a week. And so instead of it being the third week of December, it now became a game that was going to be played on the second week of December, which is, the Saturday of December, second Saturday in December. And so that shift, if you've been following the podcast, you know that shift actually caused me to change my plans because I was going to be in LA for my birthday. I just recently celebrated, celebrated my 52nd birthday. And so I changed because if I had kept those plans, I would have missed the Celebration Bowl, which I wasn't going to do since my school was playing. Long story short, it had been about, I want to say 3 weeks since our last game. And for the winner of the SWAC, which was Jackson State, they played their conference championship game on December 7th. So there was no week in between. So they did not have any quote unquote time to rest. They played in their conference championship, and then they had, just that week to prepare for South Carolina State University in the Celebration Bowl. And there was discussions about the fact of you have a Bulldog team that would be coming in well rested. They're even though their quarterback had not played in what would be the better part of a month and a half. There was talk about, the fact that South Carolina State would come into the game with a lot of rest and Jackson State wouldn't, because they would have played their conference championship game the week before. Now, in years past, before the bowls moved up a week, the SWAC champion would have a week of rest and then play in the Celebration Bowl, wherein the MEAC conference winner, or representative, I should say, would have 4 weeks off. So basically a month off. So what was interesting was I saw a clip from the commissioner of the SWAC conference, and I'm paraphrasing here. He was very, frustrated, if you will, that the SWAC would not get enough rest in between the games, given the fact that the MEAC would have 3 weeks off and they wouldn't. Now, again, that has nothing to do with the MEAC, because the MEAC is, we don't have as many teams, and that's just the way the ball bounces. And I can't really say coming into it that it gave either team any type of advantage, because last year's winner was Florida A&M, and Florida A&M is in the SWAC, wherein last year's MEAC winner, it was Howard, and Howard had the rest. FAMU didn't. FAMU had a week of rest, but they didn't have the same amount of rest, where Howard had a whole month off. So between the discrepancy between the conferences, it's never going to be balanced. The year prior to that, Jackson State, they won the conference in the SWAC, and North Carolina Central won the year before. And the year before that, it was South Carolina State and Jackson State, and South Carolina State won, and North Carolina Central won. So the MEAC has dominated for the most part the Celebration Bowl, but the rest time in between has nothing to do with it. I guess I said all that to say that. But that was the discussion coming into the game. And then so we fast forward to the game, which again happened last week at the time of this recording, and Jackson State wins the game. And not only did they win the game, they dominated. From probably the onset, they appeared to be the more rested team, even though they weren't. They appeared to be the team that was focused, that was sharp. And I'm not making any excuses for South Carolina State. We got beat. And, the final score was 28-7, but I'll be honest, it felt worse than that. Like, we couldn't do anything offensively. I knew that we would be a little rusty, because here's the thing. You can practice all day. You can practice 5 times a day. It doesn't matter. There's nothing that you can do to simulate what you would see or feel in a football game, right? And so that happened. But I think the quarterback, Eric Phoenix, was probably the most rustiest player on the field. He wasn't sharp at all. His passes were all over the place. He had a lot of incomplete passes. There were some drop passes. There were passes where guys were wide open. He just simply overthrew them. And that's just rust. I mean, again, you can't really simulate. And again, I'm not making excuses. Hats off to Jackson State, because not only was Phoenix rusty, but they really got after him. And you could kind of tell that, not that his ankle was bothering him, but he wasn't 100%. I could see that with my own 2 eyes. And, when you get that type of thing happening, it's a recipe for a disaster. And if your quarterback's not playing well, then the team's not going to play well. And, the score was 14-0 at halftime. And so we were still in the game per se, but Jackson State prevailed. And again, hats off to Jackson State. I take nothing away from them. They are the champs. And I think anybody that watched that game understood that day, Jackson State was a better team. Now, I will say I'm a little biased, but I think if we play Jackson State 10 times, we'll probably win 5. They'll win 5. I think if you look at the team statistically, we threw the ball a lot more than Jackson State did this year, and Jackson State ran the ball a lot more than we did. But the numbers statistically on offense and defense were almost identical. I think these two teams were very well matched and probably the closest of talent coming into the game. I mentioned earlier that we beat Jackson State in 2021. You guys know and heard about it because I did a podcast about it. And it felt good to beat Coach Prime. And at that particular time, we came in, I think Jackson State had lost one game all year, and South Carolina State was 6-5. And they really were supposed to be the mat that Jackson State was supposed to step on their way to the crown. Well, we beat the hell out of them. I think the score was like 31-10 or something like that. We threw Shedeur Sanders around like a rag doll. It was a dominating performance. But I will be honest. I think if that South Carolina State team plays Jackson State, that Jackson State team 10 times, South Carolina State probably wins once. We didn't have a really good quarterback at that particular time, but he had a good day that day. And that was the difference. And so I said all that to say this. We almost had it. We almost had it. So we came very close, but not close enough. And so that leaves us as a university, as a football program, with a lot of questions. And we're going to take a quick commercial break. And on the other side, I'll tell you some things that you don't know that probably could help us going forward. Sit tight. We'll be back in just a second. Are you feeling nostalgic for the golden eras of rap and soul music? If so, tune in to the Rap Soul Podcast. We are your weekly journey through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, spotlighting the music and the hidden gems that shaped the soundtrack of our lives. From the powerful beats to the soulful melodies, we bring you the best of the past with fresh insights and stories. Rediscover the music that defined a generation. Subscribe to the Rap Soul Podcast and enjoy the vibes. And just like that, we are back. Once again, it's your boy 12 Kyle. This is the 12 Kyle Podcast, and we're talking about almost. We almost had it. We were almost champs. My beloved South Carolina State University Bulldogs falling short in the Celebration Bowl versus Jackson State. I mentioned before the break of some things that we could do going forward. Now, here's the thing that everybody has to understand about college football. In this day and time now, especially with the transfer portal, you have to get used to understanding the fact that a lot of your players aren't going to be that played on your team this year aren't going to be on your team next year. I mean, that's just it's just a fact. And it's really just where the game is. We've already lost a couple of players to the transfer portal. We've had a couple of kids, who had that quote unquote COVID year declare for the NFL draft. And so that happens. What has to happen is going forward, you have to be able to recruit. In our case, I think Coach Berry, he doesn't strike me as a guy who can't recruit because he's got some talent on that team. Now, granted, a lot of the players that were on the team were already there from the previous regime under Coach Pugh. That being said, when you're talking about college athletics, there's two things that you have to remember. One, you have to be able to recruit a kid to come to your school. And then now with the transfer portal and NIL, you have to recruit a kid to keep him there or her there. So recruiting is a constant thing. There's going to be times where a kid wants more playing time, and there's going to be times where a kid thinks that the grass is green on the other side, and I can go to this school, and maybe it'll give me a better shot at making it to the NFL. And all of those things could be true, or it could just be a situation where a kid sees that maybe there's no end in sight for them to play at that particular university, and they want to, take it to the next level or take it somewhere else. Or there could be kids who are actually just chasing the dollar, the NIL dollars, and rendering their services wherever they can. Unfortunately, it's a dirty game, but that's how the game is being played now. And I'm all for kids getting their money because here's the thing: these universities make a boatload of money on all of these kids. And the kids, even with NIL deals, are getting a very, very small sample of the money that is actually owed to them. That being said, that's just a part of the game. So I think, one, we have to understand that. The second thing is that understanding and having faith that Coach Berry is going to recruit better players than what we had. We had really good players. And I mean, like, for us to go 9-3, win the conference, which is our 18th conference championship of all time in school history. Nobody else in our school, no other team in our conference has done that. To win our 18th MEAC title is a lot. It says a lot. And especially in particular for a coach who wasn't here the year before. It's rare. This is the first time in our school history where a new coach has come in and has won in his first season. And I think it's only happened one other time in the conference's history. So, that said, I mean, like, if we're being realistic, this team and Coach Berry probably about 2 or 3 years ahead of where they probably should be. So I think for the alumni listening and watching, you have to take that with a grain of salt. Understand that, this program is still being built. Also, we're going to need money. We're going to need cash. We're going to need cream. We're going to need moolah. We're going to need whatever you want to call it, Fetty, Skrilla, paper, papes, whatever you want to call it. We're going to need cash, money, because cash rules everything around me. I mean, the university and the program will definitely need more because in order to get it, in order to give it, you got to get it. In order to get it, you have to give it. So if we want to see those results on the field, alumni, as well as friends of the program, like billionaires like King Germ, or Uncle Dolomite or Baylor, feel free to donate to our program. And our alumni base is a very strong base and a very proud base. And I know that we will, support our teams and support our school financially in any way we can. But understand that, you have to put into it. It doesn't happen by osmosis. It's something where we have to be financially invested in the program. But even as I look at these statistics, you have to be realistic about where we were. Statistic wise, we got beat up and down the field. We didn't run the ball well. We only ran for 30 yards. We passed for 148 yards. I mean, like, you can't win a college football game playing like that unless your defense has like 17 turnovers. And again, I take nothing away from Jackson State. They won straight up and down. It wasn't even, like I said, we lost by 21 points, but the score probably felt like 35 points. And I sat in that stadium and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. We played our worst game of the season that day. But that being said, the great part about it is you get a chance to do it all over again. One thing people don't understand, and I want to be clear when I say this, particularly to you fans, and that's fans of any sport. Starting over is always hard. I don't care who you are. I don't care where you are. Starting over is always hard. One of my coaches, Coach Wheeler, God bless the dead, used to always say that. Starting over is always hard. And the reason being is that there's so much that goes into a season. There's so much that you put into yourself and the program and everything that is that you do. You don't just hit reset, or you don't just get the chance to pick up where you left off. So for the kids who will be returning to the program at South Carolina State University to play football next year, and I'm sure they'll start their workouts in next month in January when they return from the Christmas break. But the thing is, you don't get to the Celebration Bowl and then say, okay, hey, we're going to be we're a championship team. We're going to just roll out the footballs and we'll be back there next year. It doesn't work like that. You are literally starting from square one because no two teams are the same. So the team that you had this year even if you brought everybody back, won't be the same team next year, and you're not going to get the same results, right? So you have to be better. We already know that we had a bunch. I think we had like 20 something seniors. So we got a lot of kids to replace, and we got a lot of players to replace, and we got a lot of young men who need developing, not just on the field, but off the field as well. So all of that plays into that. And, I think sometimes fans think like, just because we made it to the championship game, that we're going to make it again next year. No, it doesn't work like that. Sometimes it happens, but you have to put in the work. And the work starts every day. It starts on the field, in the locker room, in the weight room, in the classroom. Most important, because that's where it counts. It really counts in the classroom. If you're not doing work in the classroom, then you're wasting your time on any college football team, because ultimately you still have to be progressing toward graduation. But what I will say to the team and anyone watching, thank you. We almost won it all, but we had a great year. And I think once you get past the hurt and the disappointment from losing, you understand and realize that it was still a great year. You didn't finish the way that you wanted to finish, but it was still a great year, and there's nothing to hold your head about, because there are a lot of teams across the country, college football teams, that would chop their arms off to have a 9-3 season, winning their conference title. And the last thing I'll leave you with is this. I have a story. Back in 1993, South Carolina State University's football team played on January 1st, 1993. No, 1994. It was from the 1993 season. January 1st, in the then Georgia Dome, played in the Heritage Bowl, which was the much like the Celebration Bowl, the Black College National Championship, if you will. And South Carolina State played against Southern University out of Baton Rouge. I'll never forget that game, because I stood on the sidelines of that game. Didn't play at all, right? And subsequently watched us lose to Southern 11-0. We didn't score any points. And as frustrating as it was, Southern not only was the better team, but they were the more dominant team. And even though they only scored 11 points, like I've never played in a game at any level where it was like that team across from me was just that much better. Like I've never been dominated like that. And they were dominant. I mean, like they just blew us off the field. They did everything right, and we didn't do anything right. And it was very frustrating and very tough it was a tough pill to swallow. But a funny thing happened after that game. After that game, you saw a level of dedication that I had not seen before across the board from almost every teammate that I had. And it started in that spring, started in that winter, in winter workouts, going into spring ball. You saw guys, really just giving everything they had every single day. And it translated into the summer. And then we came to summer camp, and almost everybody was in shape, and everybody was just, it seemed to be a single focus, was to not only get back to the Heritage Bowl, but to win the Heritage Bowl and win the Black College National Championship. And in 1994, that's what we did. And so on December 30th, 1994, nearly 30 years ago, we became national champions. I was a part of that team. I was a person who played. I didn't start, but I played a lot. And I'll tell you, like, that journey of that season really started with that loss to Southern, earlier that calendar year. And I think one of the most important lessons that I learned was, sometimes you can work very hard and still not get the results that you want. But if you go back and you work even harder, you still may not get the results, but you'll be satisfied. Well, this time, not only did we get the results, but I was extremely satisfied as we won the national championship. And I have my championship ring. I still have it. I don't have it on me, but I still have it. And we became champions that day. And I think there's a possibility, God willing, I think there's a possibility for all of the kids on that team, especially the ones that will be returning, to get that same feeling that I had when we lost to Southern. That burning in your chest that kind of just gnaws at you for an entire year. And it's bothersome because you knew that on that particular day you just weren't good enough. And maybe it was just that particular day. Maybe it was just maybe we weren't better than Southern that day. And that bothered me for an entire year. And I've never been as driven. I've never been as focused on a football field as I've ever been from that point up until we won the Black College National Championship, defeating Grambling in the Heritage Bowl in 1994. And we were a team of destiny. We were a team that was laser focused. I think we finished 10-2. We didn't lose a conference game. We blew a lot of teams out. But more importantly, I think the road to the championship started with a loss. And sometimes you'll find out in life when you have adversity, it looks like the end, but it's really just beginning. And so for the kids who lost that game last week, as an alum, I'm proud. I'm proud to say that I am still and always will be a Bulldog. I sat in those stands and cheered you guys on. I watched and cheered you guys on all year long, and I'll do the same next year. And it's going to be up to you as to how you write the rest of this storybook, because it's not over. For some kids, that game against Jackson State was the last time they'll put on football pads in their life. And for those who will be coming back, they got a chance. You got a chance to do something really, really special. And it's rare for teams to go back to title games. So we've got a shot, but you got to work. And you got to work harder than you worked this year. You got to work twice as hard as you did this year. If you think that you worked really hard this year, you got to work even harder. And it's got to take a lot of dedication. It's got to take a lot of focus. It's going to take a lot of, camaraderie with you and your teammates. But most importantly, it's got to start with the belief that you can do it and that you're not going to let anything stand in your way. Just 30 years ago, we did that. And that changed everything for me and my teammates. And so subsequently in life, when I got knocked down, I thought about those days. And I thought about those days where I was in 100-degree weather, running pass routes with my man Mo. And I told myself, this is a job. I'm not even getting paid to do this. Yeah, they're paying for me to go to school, but I wasn't receiving any type of financial compensation for it. But what that taught me was that if I work hard enough, if I work as hard as I ever will, I will get the results that I want. And that was a life lesson for me. And so for the kids who are watching, for the Bulldogs who are watching and listening to this episode, thank you for a great season. Remember this, if you keep working and you work harder than you did last year, you'll get another opportunity. And when you get that opportunity, take it and run with it. 30 years ago, I did. And I'm glad that I did, because I haven't had to work as hard, but on the times where I fell down in life, I got right back up because I knew that I put myself in a position to win. And at the end of the day, all you want to do is put yourself in position to win. Because if you put yourself in position to win, 9 times out of 10, a winner is going to win. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. The podcast drops every Thursday and every Sunday at midnight. Now, if you're on YouTube, check us out on YouTube. Subscribe, download there as well, 12 Kyle Podcast. Make sure you hit the notification button. That way you get notifications when the episodes drop. If you're on social media, hit us up on social media at 12 Kyle across the board on Twitter X, Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, as well as Instagram and Facebook as well. We also have merch. If you'd like to contribute to the podcast financially, hit us up, buy some merch. 12 Kyle Podcast. We have t-shirts, hoodies, and coffee mugs. And we also have a new baby. It's called the Rap Soul Podcast. It drops every Monday. You can listen and find the Rap Soul Podcast wherever you're listening or watching this podcast as well. The Rap Soul Podcast is discussions about the intersection of rap, soul music, hip hop, and R&B music from the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. It is the best music podcast you've never heard. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. We'll catch you guys next time. 5,000. Cheers.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 12 Kyle Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with a friend who needs the 12 Kyle Podcast in their life. Every listen, every download, and every share helps us grow. Thanks for being a part of the 12 Kyle Podcast community. We appreciate your support. We will catch you next time. 5,000.